going to air it out down the field. Catch and a touchdown.
It's College Football Pick'em, presented by Harbor Jiu Jitsu on AM 1490 Sports Betting Radio. Here's your host, Nick Kosko.
Welcome inside the College Football Pick'em right here on AM 1490 Sports Betting Radio. I'm your host, Nick Kosko. We are presented by Harbor Jiu Jitsu. As always, welcome to another edition of the greatest sport in the world, folks, here. College football is back, as we all know. And guess what, folks? The Big Ten is back. The Big Ten is back. Oh, it is glorious after Illinois took on Wisconsin last night. Oh, it's great, folks. This is just so great. Now we get a full slate of Big Ten football here this afternoon. And it's highlighted by, of course, I'd say Ohio State, Nebraska, and Michigan going up against Minnesota. I mean, this is just, it's great. We finally have a sense of normalcy for college football. Again, I know the Pac-12 is not back until another 2 weeks from now. November 7th is when that conference comes back. Then all of a sudden we'll have all 5 Power 5 conferences playing at once for the first time since, of course, last season. But you have the Big Ten back now, and now you have another college football playoff contender in the mix in Ohio State. And we're going to dive into them a lot here today as well. I will give you my picks later in the show. Of course, 4-1 last week, folks. We're 10-13-2 on the season now. After 2 horrendous weeks, we had a solid week last week, and of course, within our 5 picks, we are going to see some Big Ten games, and I'll let you know what I like today coming out from that conference to start out the year. And again, I talk about how random college football is this year and how some of these teams look like they are for real. They'll treat you nice one week, and then the very next week, you just wonder where it all went wrong. I mean, that very well could be the Big Ten this year, because outside of Ohio State and maybe Penn State, there are really, there's never any sure things, but the Big Ten is going to be so random this year because they're playing an 8-game schedule. They have tighter restrictions than the other conferences in terms of when it comes to the coronavirus. So these coaches around college football, I believe it's a 10-day period where they have to sit out if they test positive. We saw last week, of course, where Nick Saban looked like he wasn't going to coach, and then all of a sudden they found out it was a false positive, and he ended up testing 3 straight times negatively for the coronavirus, and he coached against Georgia, and Alabama ended up winning. And Alabama, of course, last week was one of our plays. If you were listening to the show last week, had them minus 4.5 over Georgia. So the coaches are going to be out, I think, a minimum of 10 days, and then. But here's the worst part: how are these lines going to be affected in the Big Ten if these players test positive? The players testing positive in the Big Ten means you have to sit out for 21 days. 21. These teams could be absolutely decimated for 3 straight weeks. Don't forget, the Big Ten is playing 8 games, folks. That's it. 21 days, you could be out for 3 straight games. Just like that. It's almost half the regular season for these Big Ten teams. Basically a third, because everyone's going to play. If all goes well and no games are canceled, everyone's going to play 9 games, because during the championship weekend, where you have the top 2 teams playing each other, you have the crossover games, second place versus second place, third place versus third place, and so on and so forth. So missing 3 games, you're missing a third of the season. That is going to drastically affect the lines on some of these games. It's going to affect the over-unders. It's going to affect the future bets on these games and these teams as well. Let's just say you have, certain odds on Penn State to win the Big Ten, but then their quarterback Sean Clifford tests positive, and all of a sudden they are out 3 games. He's out 3 games because he has to sit out 21 days because he tested positive. As far as I know, there's really no workaround with it in terms of false positives. i.e. the case of Nick Saban last week for Alabama. If a Big Ten, especially a star Big Ten player, God forbid Justin Fields has a false positive test, are they going to be able to test him, a certain amount of times after that within a 72-hour window, and he remains asymptomatic like Saban did, and will they allow him back onto the field? As far as I know, I don't think the Big Ten's budged off that rule yet this year. And that might be a huge problem, folks. That is going to be a huge problem for the Big Ten moving forward, especially if a star player gets it or a coach. Already Jeff Brom for Purdue tested positive, and he was trying to file an appeal that he could coach remotely over the weekend. And obviously that's not going to happen. If they're not going to allow Nick Saban to do it in the SEC, and Mike Norvell down in Florida State in the ACC, if they're not going to allow those coaches to coach remotely or have communication over Zoom with your squad while you're playing a football game, there's no way, no offense, they're letting Jeff Brom of Purdue to do that as well. So with the Big Ten back, there's excitement around college football, but again, you have to keep in mind that these stingier coronavirus rules are going to apply to some of these lines when trying to bet these games. And again, this conference hasn't played yet. They've had more time off, and they have had more time to prepare and practice. Is that necessarily a good thing right now? Because does it give merit to, obviously teams like Ohio State, they're ranked number 5 in the country right now, and they are winless. I only say that because they haven't played a game yet. They're 0-0. Nobody's played a game yet, but they're number 5. Penn State, I believe, is number 8. I got to double check. But you have a couple other teams in there, like Minnesota is 21, Michigan is 18, and Wisconsin is 14. So 5 Big Ten teams right now are still in the top 25, despite not even playing yet. And yes, Penn State is number 8 according to the latest AP poll. So what does that tell you about the rest of college football right now and the landscape right now? Everyone's beating each other up. Do they just want to shoehorn these teams in here? Are these teams actually that good? Heck, USC is number 24 right now, and they're not playing for another 3 weeks. Oregon's still in there, number 13. Again, not playing for another 3 weeks. That's for Pac-12, of course. So if these teams are actually this good, they'll prove it right. They'll prove it right away. Unfortunately for Michigan and Minnesota, someone's going to be dropping maybe out of the rankings because they play each other this weekend. And you have a 4-0 Coastal Carolina team in the top 25, like at number 25. And Marshall 4-0 at number 22. NC State is number 23 this week at 4-1. So, do one of these teams drop in the top 25 after they play each other? Possibly. You really can't have an 0-. I know it's a crazy year, but you really can't have an 0-1 team in the top 25. Unless it's, you're dropping from number 1 to, I don't know, number 18. Something drastic like that. Where it was the beginning of the year. Now it's not the beginning of the year. So we'll see if these teams are legit. So now we'll dive into Ohio State here because I do want to talk about how they are the overwhelming favorite in the Big Ten. They bring back Justin Fields. They have a loaded offense, and that features new running back Trey Sermon, who is a transfer running back from Oklahoma, and of course Ryan Day running the offense. The head coach. He's basically the offensive guru up there for the Ohio State Buckeyes. And I say that only because they've basically taken the next step after Urban Meyer. You've seen the success of this team offensively, especially last year. And after Urban Meyer stepped down, and then all of a sudden the Buckeyes took the very next step once Ryan Day fully took over. And then last year, Justin Fields, 41 touchdowns. And they had 10 more on the ground, over 50 last year. And if it weren't for Joe Burrow having, the season from what I don't even know what to call it. Arguably the greatest season of all time individually by a player. Justin Fields walks away with that Heisman Trophy last year. And the Buckeyes, they made the college football playoff, and they came up just short. They were a Fields interception away from getting to the national title game, and taking on LSU last year. So, I mean, it's easy to see why Ohio State is the overwhelming favorite in the Big Ten. The fact that number 5 still, they are in the thick of the college football playoff race already without playing the game. And we know Clemson's 1, Alabama's 2, and we don't expect anybody else other than those two to get in at the top. And right now, Notre Dame is 3, but they do have to play Clemson, and they might play them twice. So maybe Notre Dame gets knocked out because I fully expect Clemson to go undefeated. And again, because Notre Dame has to play them in the regular season, even if they rematch them in the championship game, I think Clemson's going to beat them again. So just like that, Notre Dame's out. So you have 2 spots. Is Georgia already 1 loss? I mean, they might have a rematch with Alabama in the SEC title game, but I don't see them beating them in a rematch either. So right there, 2 spots gone. Slide Ohio State up to a minimum of the 3rd overall spot. I mean, they fit right in. So could 2 Big Ten teams get in? That is a distinct possibility in my mind. I mean, Ohio State has Nebraska today. If Ohio State can't mop the floor with Nebraska, then I don't know. I wouldn't say cause for concern, but Ohio State should come out swinging today. At the very least, you cannot contain Fields, Sermon, Chris Olave, guys like that on the Buckeyes offense. And, just looking down the line, as long as the Big Ten does get in all 8 games and the championship game, it just seems to me, the college football playoff rankings are bound to have Clemson 1, Alabama 2 at the end of the year. And then, for me, I think Ohio State's going 9-0 and winning the Big Ten. Excuse me. And they're going to slide right into number 3. And then, as I mentioned before, you're going to have teams like Notre Dame and Georgia having 2 losses. They're going to be out. And then you have to wait and see if, a team like Texas A&M can get in with 1 loss because they play in the same division as Alabama, and that lone loss being to Alabama. They have Arkansas, South Carolina, Tennessee, Ole Miss, LSU, Auburn. Everyone's unranked now. So, if Texas A&M can run the table and finish with 1 loss, only loss being to Alabama, they're going to have a case. Oklahoma State, they probably have to finish undefeated in the Big 12 and win the conference title. If they do, they will get. Of course, they will get in, and that'll be that 4th spot. But that 4th spot could go to a team like Penn State, or a team like Michigan, or even a team like Wisconsin over in the West, or Minnesota. Basically, if in the Big Ten, and we're going to go under the assumption that Ohio State wins the conference at 9-0. If any other team, and it can only be one, if any other team is 7-1, i.e. Penn State or Michigan, in the Big Ten East, or a team like Wisconsin, who does not play Ohio State until, hypothetically, a Big Ten championship game, or Minnesota, again, same situation as Wisconsin. If one of those teams, and I believe those are the only teams in the Big Ten that can even challenge Ohio State, all the teams that are ranked, of course. Can Indiana can be a spoiler in the Big Ten East and maybe upset somebody? Yeah, I think Indiana could do that. They're not beating Ohio State though. And over in the West, anybody other than Minnesota or Wisconsin, I don't think Nebraska is going to do it. They're not up to task to do something like this year where they contend for a Big Ten title. No, I don't think so. So it comes down to those 5 teams, and we're going to go under the assumption that Ohio State goes 9-0, wins the Big Ten title. What other Big Ten team can slide in there? Well, they have to have 1 loss and no more than 1 loss, because under our little scenario here, Alabama or Clemson and Alabama are in top 2. Ohio State's 3 and undefeated 9-0 Big Ten champs, and then if you don't get an undefeated Oklahoma State Big 12 champion in there, then you go to maybe a 1-loss Texas A&M or a 1-loss Big Ten team with their only loss coming to Ohio State. It'd be better if it were Wisconsin or Minnesota, probably, because they'd be 8-1 and not 7-1, and the lone loss would come in the Big Ten title game. But then again, we know how late losses could also affect you. Maybe losing that late in the season affects them, and maybe a team like Michigan, who does play Ohio State at the end of the regular season. Again, don't mistake that. But if a team like Michigan, their only losses to Ohio State, and it was for the championship game or to get into the championship game, then maybe that affects Michigan. But again, you have to weigh that into consideration in terms of their one loss. And if their one loss is to a champion in Ohio State, then you have to give them playoff consideration. So the Big Ten could get 2 teams in, is basically what I'm getting at here. The Big Ten has a chance to do that. It's just going to be tough because, you only have the 8-game schedule, and a team has to look pretty darn dominant against everybody else and have a close game at Ohio State. That's just the way it's going to work this year. Again, the Big Ten has never had 2 teams in, and out of the 6 editions of the college football playoff, they've had 4 years where they've had a team in. Three of those years were Ohio State, and the 1 year was Michigan State, and they got blanked by Alabama in the semifinals. So do I expect anybody else to get in the Big Ten? Personally, I don't expect it. I think Ohio State is going to win the Big Ten. I think they're going to dominate Nebraska, to be honest with you. I don't know if they're going to cover. We can also look at that line later. But again, I don't think the Big Ten is going to have 2 teams in. But if you're going to put any money on any of these teams, if you're just banking on a Big Ten team to get into the playoff, obviously Ohio State. But if you want to double dip and be a little adventurous, your money is best served on a Penn State, a Michigan, a Minnesota, or a Wisconsin. If it's not one of those teams, I don't expect anybody else from the Big Ten to make a move for the college football playoff. I literally just I don't see it because unless Iowa always drops 2 games here or there. They'll pull off an upset. They'll probably be ranked at the end of the year. Other than that, Big Ten West, Northwestern, Nebraska, no. Illinois, absolutely not. Who else on here? Purdue, I mentioned before, no. And you look at the Big Ten East. Other than the top 3, Michigan State, no, brand new coach. They're not going to be that good this year. Maryland, no. Indiana can be a sport. They could be. I think Indiana's actually the 4th best team in that division this year, but they're not going to make the playoff. No way. They'll drop a couple. My school, Rutgers, no. I hope they win 1 or 2 games this year, just to give fans hope moving forward. But again, folks, those are your teams though. Ohio State, Michigan, Penn State, and then Minnesota and Wisconsin. Put money on Ohio State to make the playoff, win the Big Ten. But if anybody else is going to make it, it's going to come from that grouping out of the Big Ten. Otherwise, I don't see anybody else from this conference making a run for the playoff, or even the conference championship game for that matter. But again, it's 2020, so conference championship game could be all wacky. Ohio State versus Purdue or Northwestern, like it was the one. Ohio State Northwestern was the game a couple of years ago, because Northwestern edged everybody out in the conference record, and they somehow, some way got to the championship game that year. Amazing. Truly amazing. Just a quick reminder, of course, that this show is brought to you by Harbor Jiu Jitsu, located inside the Attilas Gym in Egg Harbor Township. Check out my boy Al Bruce over there. His classes on Tuesdays, Wednesdays, Thursdays, all starting at 5:30 and 6:30. And then on Saturdays in the morning as well. Great workout, great time to learn self-defense, MMA, jiu-jitsu. You can do it all at Harbor Jiu Jitsu, located inside the Attilas Gym in Egg Harbor Township. Make sure to give me a follow on Twitter at NickKosko59, NickKosko 59. Be sure to follow the station at 1490 SportsBet as well. You can interact with us on social there as well. And I'll tell you what, if you saw my Twitter timeline over the last couple of days, I was a little more worried about the Eagles, and then I said, I have to turn it on to it. I have to pivot a little bit and worry about my good folks that are listening in for my college football betting advice. And again, folks, 4-1 last week. We had a great week. Hopefully we're going to continue that this weekend as well. Got my 5 picks coming up later in the show as always. And just a little teaser here, 2 Big Ten games are in play this weekend. Also, we're bringing back one team that we sorely missed last week as well. All right, we are going to step aside and take a quick break. On the other side, we'll dive into the rest of the college football slate. We'll start looking into more of the lines as well for the Big Ten and what else is going on around the world of college football. Make sure to keep it locked here. You're listening to College Football Pick'em right here on AM 1490 Sports Betting Radio.
Betting college football? You've come to the right place. It's College Football Pick'em, presented by Harbor Jiu Jitsu on AM 1490 Sports Betting Radio.
Welcome back inside College Football Pick'em right here on AM 1490 Sports Betting Radio. I'm your host, Nick Kosko. We are presented by Harbor Jiu Jitsu, located inside the Attila's Gym in Egg Harbor Township. And again, Big Ten back here, folks, this weekend. Spent a lot of time on them in the first segment. Make sure to stay tuned for my 5 picks, 4-1 on the week. Last week, 10, 13, and 2 on the season. So we had a nice little bounce back weekend last weekend. And aside from the Big Ten, there is other college football going on this weekend as well. You have Syracuse and Clemson. Oh boy, I cannot wait for that game at 12 noon. By the way, folks, the way Clemson just played last week, I don't know if you were watching, 83 points. 83. Excuse me, 73. Oh my goodness, I had to check myself there. They almost put up 80. It was so bad against Georgia Tech last week, folks. On the road, Trevor Lawrence, did his thing. Clemson went through a couple quarterbacks. They had their punter in at quarterback at one point. That is how bad it was. 73-7. If you are truly a degenerate, you might actually look at this game today against Syracuse because they lost to Liberty last week. The over-under is 61.5, and I think Clemson could do that by themselves almost. Clemson is a 46-point favorite. 46 at home. How is that possible? 46 points. The blatant disrespect for Syracuse there after Clemson put up 73 points and won by 66 last week. So, I'm not shocked at the line because we knew this was coming, but, I would not touch this thing with a 10-foot pole unless you're a degenerate. Or if you're confident in the over-under at 61.5, then I'd say, okay, you can use this game. But that line, oh my goodness. This is why you can't bet college football half the time. You're going to have ridiculous lines like that. Like, that is ridiculous. Maybe you take Syracuse plus 46 and you would think they would cover that, but, after watching Clemson last week destroy and dismantle Georgia Tech, I'll tell you what, that's just bad. Oh, that's just that is awful. We have a big ranked matchup though at noon still in the ACC though. NC State, North Carolina. North Carolina is a 15.5 point favorite at home, and NC State is number 23 and UNC is number 14. Over/under set at 60. Now the reason why I believe this game is just so far, or it's so spread apart now, with UNC being a big favorite, over a 2-touchdown favorite. North Carolina's a favorite, excuse me, and it's because NC State does not have their quarterback anymore. Devin Leary is done. He got hurt last week, and bye-bye. And I told you last week, folks, that NC State was working for us, and they replaced us late when they took on Duke, because we had Cincinnati at Tulsa last week for one of those games, and Cincinnati, their game was postponed due to positive COVID tests. So we decided to roll with NC State. Our boy Devin Leary cashed in, but he got hurt. NC State still ended up covering, but now I got to stay away from NC State. Without Devin Leary, I don't know where this team goes. They don't have that good of an option at quarterback after Leary. He was playing really well for the Wolfpack. Now that he's out for the season, that's it. Put a fork in NC State. They might win a couple more games, might somehow still stay ranked in the top 25, but I don't trust that at all. I don't trust them to cover today against North Carolina. But, again, do I trust North Carolina entirely? They can put up points, but, they are a deceptive 3-1 team right now. After that suspect loss, an upset loss to Florida State. Because don't forget, folks, North Carolina was a top 5 team last week, and then they lose 31-28 to Florida State. So what does that tell you? I mean, I don't trust North Carolina to cover. It's like I don't trust NC State to cover, being plus 15.5 because they don't have their quarterback. But I don't trust North Carolina to cover because they lost last week to a bad Florida State team that maybe found its footing, but it was an inexcusable loss to Florida State. Even if they had won and they didn't cover, it's one of those games that you have to shake your head at and say, no, not today. Kansas State, Big 12 matchup. Kansas State ranked 20th. They're a 19.5-point favorite. Over-under set at 48.5. Georgia Southern, Coastal Carolina. Yes, folks, this is a top 25 matchup because Coastal Carolina is 4-0, and they are ranked number 25. They're a 5.5-point favorite at home. That's a nice little Sun Belt matchup for you there. 51.5 is your over-under. And that's also a 12 noon kickoff as well. Marshall, we mentioned before in the opening segment, they were number 22 in the country. They are 4-0 on the year. They're a 16.5-point favorite over Florida. Florida Atlantic's played one game this year. It just goes to show you that the positive COVID tests are affecting a lot of people, and a lot of these teams throughout the college football season, and how they're going to. Florida Atlantic's been hampered by this with their schedule, because they're supposed to take on Georgia Southern and South Florida first 2 weeks, both postponed. Florida Atlantic barely beats Colgate 21-17, and then they had a game against Southern Mississippi postponed as well. So I'd expect Marshall to cover this game because Florida Atlantic has barely played, and I feel like Marshall is now in a groove and undefeated. Could Florida Atlantic pull the upset? Sure, but I mean, just by the way Florida Atlantic played against Colgate again, that was their first game. They missed their first two, just with everything going on with the positive test. But I mean, I think Marshall just is a lot better. I'd expect Marshall to win that game, but at 16.5, tough to tell if they're really going to beat them by 3 scores at that point at home. Over-under is at 51.5. I would take the over on that, though. I would definitely take the over. Alabama, Tennessee. Alabama coming off the huge win over Georgia last week, and we had that. Tennessee looked absolutely abysmal last week against Kentucky. A rare home loss to Kentucky, and it was a blowout loss. We had Kentucky last week, and that was one of our better plays of the season, actually. Jared Garantano just looked absolutely dreadful, and then the backup quarterback came in, and he immediately threw an interception as well. So I don't know where Tennessee goes from here. They're not beating Alabama. I'd be shocked if they make this one a competitive game. Alabama is a 21.5-point favorite. Considering they beat Georgia by almost 20 points last week, I would fully expect Alabama to cover this game, and they probably hit the over. Over's at 65. I say Bama puts up at least 40-something points, and then you have to hope if Tennessee could put up a 20 spot at minimum to give yourself a chance as well. But I think Alabama is bound to cover this game. It just, again, for our sake and for our plays and our pick segment, we generally stay away from these huge lines. But I mean, if you're looking just to bet everything today, I mean, Alabama, a 3-touchdown favorite, a little bit more because it's 21.5. Pay attention to that line, see if it moves at all during the day or before 3:30. If there's some late betting, late plays on Tennessee, in case that drops below 20. If that drops below 21, I'd say hit it on Alabama for a 3-touchdown win. I absolutely think they're going to dominate them today. I really do. I really think they're going to dominate them. Number 3, Notre Dame takes on Pittsburgh at 3:30 as well. Notre Dame's a 10-point favorite on the road. Notre Dame is, I mean, they're legit 4-0, but they've had some shaky games within the ACC the last 2 weeks. They beat Florida State 42-26. Okay, you weren't ready for a new quarterback necessarily. Ready, Florida State? All right, I'll give you that. But they hosted Louisville the next week, and they beat them 12-7 last week. Where did the Notre Dame offense go? Ian Book was 11 of 19 for 106 yards. Sorry, what? This game was on the ground. Kyron Williams, 127 yards off 25 carries, but he didn't score. Ian Book scored a rushing touchdown for Notre Dame. We talk about Malik Cunningham. Remember back a couple weeks ago, earlier in the year, when Louisville was ranked and so was Miami. That was the big Saturday night matchup, and I said it's going to be one between King and Cunningham, and King outdueled him. Cunningham, 16 of 19, great, 132 yards and a touchdown. And this was a sloppy game, folks. And there's just no scoring. And Notre Dame had a 6-0 lead. I don't know how they ended up winning this football game. Because there was they had a 6-0 lead at halftime. And then Louisville has their best drive of the day. They go up 7-6, and then Notre Dame immediately responds to go 12-7. They don't get the 2-point conversion, and then it was just punt. I will say Notre Dame ended the game well. 14-play drive, 57 yards, 8-minute drive to end the game. That's fine. Notre Dame grinded out a win, but they beat Louisville, who's now 1-4 by 5 at home. You're freaking Notre Dame. You're in the college football playoff conversation. You beat Louisville by 5? Ugh. Now you're a 10-point favorite on the road against Pittsburgh, which I'd say is a better team than Louisville. I don't know. Double-digit road favorite. Generally got to stay away. And, again, I got to question what exactly is up with Notre Dame going into the week. Just doesn't look good. Iowa State, Oklahoma State, that's probably the biggest matchup of the weekend if you're really looking at it from a standpoint of how it affects the layout of the college football playoff down the line. We'll talk about Cincinnati SMU later, and yes, that's a ranked matchup. Cincinnati number 9, SMU's number 16, but arguably your biggest game of the weekend is going to be at 3:30 when Iowa State travels to Oklahoma State. If Iowa State wins this game, folks, they'd be 4-0 in the Big 10, or excuse me, Big 12, 4-1 overall. They would drop Oklahoma State to 3-1 overall and 2-1 in the Big 12. And now you're not going to have an undefeated Big 12 champion. You could still have a team like Iowa State be undefeated within the conference, but they're not going to be undefeated overall. And if Iowa State wins today, Oklahoma State, don't forget, is a 3.5-point favorite. If Iowa State wins today, that shakes up everything. And that might be the final nail in the coffin for the Big 12 when it comes to their college football playoff hopes. So this is a very, very important game to look out for later this afternoon because, again, Oklahoma State, they have the players, right? And Spencer Sanders might be back fully healthy, their quarterback, today. Tylan Wallace, of course, star receiver. You got Hubbard in the backfield as well, star running back. If they could put it all together and Oklahoma State gets a statement win today, then all right, you can look at Oklahoma State as a legit college football playoff team. But in the case of Iowa State, folks, I'm telling you right now, if they win this game, pull the upset on the road at Boone Pickens Stadium, they're going to shake up the landscape because then that is going to really open the door for a second SEC team and a second Big Ten team. Pac-12, it only helps the Pac-12 more as well. I mean, the Pac-12 is going to try to get 6 regular season games in, plus a 7th with the championship game when they start November 7th. The Pac-12 is going to need a 7-0 champion like Oregon or USC. The Pac-12 is going to need an undefeated champion to have a chance. But I'll tell you what, I'm telling you right now, the Pac-12 is rooting for Iowa State and anybody else other than Ohio State in the Big Ten, like a Penn State or a Michigan, they're going to be rooting for Iowa State today over Oklahoma State to pull off the upset and to open up some spots. Because again, the ACC to me is not going to get two teams in. The way things are shaping up right now, Notre Dame is going to be highly ranked all year. They'll play Clemson. I say Clemson wins. Maybe that's Notre Dame's only loss. Rematched in the championship game, Clemson wins again. Like I mentioned earlier in the show, that's the way I see it going down. That gets rid of Notre Dame with the two losses. And now if Iowa State beats Oklahoma State today, oh boy. Only a 3.5-point dog on the road, by the way. It'd be a good play either way, I'd say. Iowa State, though, they can cause madness early, and the Big Ten is just starting, and the Pac-12 hasn't even started yet, and they could open the door wide open for these conferences with a win today. Penn State, Indiana, number 8 Penn State, by the way. They are they're going to be in Bloomington at 3:30. We'll get into that game in a little bit. That's one of our games that we are picking in our 5 picks. Virginia Tech, number 19. They are at Wake Forest. Virginia Tech, now they are a 9.5-point favorite here on the road. Interesting. Surprised that it's not a double digits yet. But Virginia Tech is a solid ACC program this year. I mean, they're playing pretty well. And Wake Forest, Wake Forest's 2-2 record's a little deceptive to me because they've won 2 in a row. I mean, they were dominated by Clemson, but they played a little bit better than maybe the score indicated. They were edged by NC State, 45-42. They had their game, against Notre Dame postponed. That's scheduled for December 12th now, by the way. But their last 2 wins come over Campbell. I mean, come on. And Virginia. And Virginia is not really showing anything this year. They're 1-3. Virginia's only win was over Duke to start the year. They've lost 3 straight since. So Wake Forest, I mean, they've caught a little bit of a fire, maybe a tiny, maybe a little spark here. If they are going to cover this game, they're a big home dog, so not the worst play in the world here against Virginia Tech. Michigan, Minnesota. Again, we are going to dive into that game in a little bit in the next segment. During our picks, as Michigan's a 3-point favorite on the road. That's, again, another one of your big matchups. That's your primetime game. That's a Fowler Herb Street special on ABC later tonight at 7:30. Jim Harbaugh, maybe he finally has a quarterback. Maybe. Joe Milton. Or Minnesota is going to say, hey, we still have Tanner Morgan. We have Rashad Bateman back. And we have PJ Fleck because we rode the boat. We rode the boat at Minnesota. And we might just end Michigan's hopes and dreams in week 1. Speaking of Virginia, by the way, they're at Miami tonight at 8 o'clock. Number 11, Miami. They are still in the thick of things, and their only losses to Clemson. I can't, again, the ACC can get another team in the playoff besides Clemson. It's just not going to happen. And if it's going to happen, it's going to be Notre Dame, or it's probably going to be Miami. But Miami would need to win out, and of course, win the title game and beat Clemson in a rematch. If Notre Dame is going to get in, they have to, at minimum, split with Clemson, of course, or just beat them both times. But they have to split. If one of these teams splits with Clemson, and they only have 1 loss, and Clemson has 1 loss, they might both get in, because Clemson is just that dominant this year. By the way, so you can't rule it out. But I just don't see it happening because Clemson is just that good. 9 o'clock tonight, Cincinnati, SMU, big group of 5 matchup, and we are going to talk about that game in our pick segment as well. Luke Fickell and his Cincinnati Bearcats still in the top 10. They're 3-0. SMU 5-0, number 16 in the country, and that's probably your best bet. One of those teams for the American Athletic Conference, and not that a group of 5 teams is going to make the playoffs this year. Not that they ever will until they expand, probably. But your best bet probably is Cincinnati. This is their biggest matchup of the year. If they beat SMU handily, I mean, you can probably consider them to move up a spot or 2 going into next week, and then they have to run the table. They have to run the table, otherwise they are not getting in, or they have no chance of getting in. Not that they're going to get it anyway. But Cincinnati is your last best bet for a group of 5 team to get into the playoffs. So check those odds. And if you could, sneak in a play there for them, I mean, it wouldn't hurt. 10-15 tonight, by the way, folks. BYU's a sneaky 5-0 and number 12 in the country. Remember the beginning of the year when we saw BYU just beat up on Navy and we're like, wow, Navy is either really bad or BYU is really good. We were erring on the side of caution and saying maybe Navy's really that bad. BYU had their game against Army postponed. They destroyed Troy. They destroyed Louisiana Tech. UT St. Antonio, 27-20. They edged them out. Then they pretty much handily beat Houston. They have Texas State tonight, Western Kentucky, Boise State. Who else they got here? North Alabama. I mean, their schedule is not that good, and they have San Diego State. It's not good. So I mean, unless BYU destroys everybody and finishes undefeated, they have what 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. If they finish 10-0, I don't know. You really can't give them They play an independent schedule, but it's not a good independent schedule. They didn't pull a Notre Dame this year and say, all right, we're independent, but we're going to go to the ACC this year because we want to make the college football playoff, and it's a wacky year, so we have to do something. So unless BYU goes 10-0 and everybody else kind of just starts falling down a little bit, I mean, come on, BYU playoff? No, it won't happen. It won't happen with that schedule. I can tell you that right now. All right, we're going to step aside, take one last break. On the other side, it's our picks. Once again, 5 picks, 10, 13, and 2 on the year. Let's try to go 5-0 this week, folks. We had a 4-1 weekend last week. Can we go 5-0? Stick around. It's College Football Pick'em right here at AM 1490, Sports Betting Radio.
Now back to College Football Pick'em with Nick Kosko, presented by Harbor Jiu Jitsu on AM 1490, Sports Betting Radio.
Welcome back inside the College Football Pick'em right here on AM 1490 Sports Betting Radio. I'm your host, Nick Kosko. We are presented by Harbor Jiu Jitsu as always. All right, a little rapid fire now as we conclude the show with my 5 picks. 4-1 last week, 10, 13, and 2 on the season. We are going to start out with, by the way, of course, you can always hear this little segment with me and Rich Quinones on Back Your Play on Wednesdays around 4:20 Eastern, right here at AM 1490, and catch Rich, of course, 4 to 6 on Tuesdays and Thursdays on this very station. All right, first pick of the day, Auburn and Ole Miss. Now, again, Auburn, they have fallen down in a bit of a hole. The offense is going nowhere. Quarterback Bo Nix, where have you gone? Offensive coordinator Chad Morris, what are you doing? Just not happening. And I'll tell you what, I like Lane Kiffin's offense at Ole Miss. I think they're due for a nice little bounce-back game here this week. And they had a poor loss to Arkansas last week, but they were in that shootout against Alabama, if you remember. They put up 48 points and lost. Shootout with Kentucky, 42 points, won. 35 points against Florida, lost. So there's no doubt Ole Miss can score, and I think Auburn is gonna meet their maker here this afternoon at 12 noon as Lane Kiffin and his Ole Miss Rebels. That is moved actually to 3.5. That line. We had it 3 earlier in the week, but now that it's 3.5, that's a little significant because it's more than a field goal. And I'd say we have to mark that down. And as we do, we mark down the significant line changes here if they move. And Ole Miss, that is significant. So a 3.5 point dog at home. I like Ole Miss, so give me the Rebels and the Lane train moving forward. Choo. Iowa State, Oklahoma State. We mentioned that game earlier in the show as well. That's probably our biggest game of the weekend at 3:30. Number 17, Iowa State, at number 6, Oklahoma State. Oklahoma State, a 3.5 point favorite at home. So same type of line we just dealt with in the previous game. But I mentioned Iowa State can cause a lot of havoc and chaos if they win this football game. But I do like Oklahoma State with the possibility of Spencer Sanders coming back. But either way, they still have Tylan Wallace at receiver and Chuba Hubbard at running back. So is Iowa State going to keep up with that? I don't know. And the fact that Oklahoma State is only a 3.5 point favorite at home and not more than I thought they were going to be. I thought it was going to be around 4.5, 5. I like Oklahoma State because this is the Big 12's last hope, I would say, for a champion, or excuse me, for a college football playoff participant this year. Unless Iowa State can run the table and finish with 1 loss, and that's totally possible, and then they have some weight. But an undefeated Oklahoma State in the college football playoff is enticing. for the committee, and the Big 12 is, I would say, as a conference, is hoping for it. So Brock Purdy for Iowa State, the quarterback, got off to a slow start. He's picked it up a little bit since then. He's 78 of 125 in the year, 912 yards and 4 touchdowns. But again, I think the offense for Oklahoma State is going to play a little keep away. This might be one of those games where Chuba Hubbard is going back into the Heisman race here. So I like Oklahoma State minus 3.5 at home against Iowa State. Moving down the line, Penn State, Indiana. We had this game initially at 6.5 for Penn State, a road favorite. That's moved to 6 now, so we will indicate that. Again, it's only a half a point, and it's still less than a full touchdown, but you know what? We'll take it, folks. So people are putting the money on Indiana. I mentioned before, Indiana can play spoiler this year. I think they can knock off one of the big boys. I don't think they're going to knock off Ohio State, even though they usually play them well. They usually play Penn State pretty well as well, but I feel like if Indiana's going to knock off one of the blue bloods of this division, they'll maybe knock off a Michigan, and they'll win a couple more games than they're supposed to, and you're looking at possibly Indiana being the fourth best team, which, fourth best team in a 7-team division doesn't sound that great, but usually when this division is hot, it's Ohio State, it's Michigan, it's Penn State, it's Michigan State as well, and Indiana, Maryland, and Rutgers are the bottom feeders. So I think Indiana can be a problem this year, but Penn State, I think they're just too good, whether they have Journey Brown or not. And there was a report he might miss the entire season. Then he said he can't wait to get back into the field. So I don't know what's going on with Journey Brown. I wouldn't expect him to play today at 3:30. Unless something drastically changes in the next couple hours. But Penn State as a whole, I think, is a much better team, and I think they're good for a win by a touchdown here on the road. So give me the Nittany Lions minus 6 to open up things in their Big Ten season as well. So we'll go to game number 4, Cincinnati at SMU. We mentioned this as one of our games this week only because we wanted to see what Cincinnati gave us after being they were +3, folks, last week. I believe it was, or it was only minus. They were -3 at Tulsa, if you could believe that. If I had that wrong, and no, I did not. -3 at Tulsa last week before the game got postponed. -3 on the road against Tulsa. How's it not bigger? And now I'm thinking to myself, I know they're playing a top 20 team in SMU on the road, but how is Cincinnati not a favorite again? SMU's a -2.5 point favorite at home, so we're going to take Cincinnati +2.5. I really think Cincinnati is the best Group of 5 team remaining right now. And again, this stuff changes week to week, but I like the way Luke Fickell's built up that program. Shane Buechele, this SMU quarterback, is legit. This dude almost has 2,000 yards already on the year. Over 1,700 yards and 12 touchdowns. So if Cincinnati is going to stop the SMU offense, you better get pressure on Shane Buechele. Otherwise, it could be a shootout and maybe a long day for the Bearcats. But the fact that I think they're going to win this game outright. It's +2.5, so they can't lose by a field goal. But we're going to lose this one. But I still believe Cincinnati is going to win this game outright. So give me the Bearcats +2.5 on the road at SMU. Final game, we mentioned it before, biggest Big Ten matchup of the day. You have Ohio State, Nebraska. I think just because Ohio State is going to be on national TV and Nebraska was, they were clamoring to come back to play college football this year. God forbid, but then the Big Ten's like, okay, you want to play so bad? We'll give you Ohio State week 1. How about that on the road? But Michigan, Minnesota, Jim Harbaugh, can he coach up Joe Milton? Is there pixie dust from Harbaugh? Does he finally have a quarterback, Joe Milton, in the mold of, I should say, of Cam Newton? But he's been very inconsistent. He's a very big, strong quarterback, big arm, but very raw. Can Jim Harbaugh do enough with him so they can squeak by and get a win here this evening, 7:30 at night tonight? And Minnesota, again, they bring back Tanner Morgan. Great quarterback last year, 30 touchdowns, only 7 picks, high completion percentage in the mid-60s. And, of course, Rashad Bateman's back. He's a projected first-round pick in the NFL draft, so you have a lot to stop. It's up to Michigan's defense to slow them down at the start. And if Joe Milton plays solid, turnover-free football, I think Michigan is going to win this game on the road. They're -3 on the road, and I think they're going to cover. I know it's dangerous on the road because they're only favored by a field goal, and they very well could win by a game-winning field goal. But I do like Michigan. I think their defense is going to do enough. And I think Jim Harbaugh finally has the most talented quarterback he's had in his time. And now it's up to his coaching. If Jim Harbaugh is as good as a quarterback coach as we think he is, then they'll get it done. Joe Milton will get it done, and Michigan's going to cover. All right, recap. Ole Miss plus 3.5. Oklahoma State minus 3.5. Penn State minus 6. Cincinnati minus 2.5. And Michigan minus 3. Those are my 5 picks here today. So good luck to me. Good luck to you if you are betting these games as well. That's going to do it for me. Enjoy the games today, folks. You have been listening to College Football Pick'em right here on AM 1490 Sports Betting Radio.